Before we dive into today's story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories that touch the heart and inspire the soul. Your support means everything. It was late afternoon, the sky dark with heavy clouds, and rain poured as if the heavens were breaking. Grace, a young banker, was driving home when something caught her eye near a flooded gutter. At first, she thought it was just debris washed away by the storm, but when she slowed down, her heart froze. A teenage boy lay motionless on the muddy ground, trembling, his lips cracked, his skin burning with fever. His breathing was shallow, almost gone. Grace slammed the brakes, jumped out of her car, and ran to him. "Oh, God, no, please," she whispered, as she lifted his frail body. He was shockingly light, like life itself was slipping from him. Without hesitation, she carried him into her car and sped to the nearest hospital, her hands shaking on the wheel. Doctors rushed him into emergency care. Grace sat in the hallway, drenched and praying. Hours later, the doctor stepped out, saying, "Another hour and he would have been gone. You saved him." Grace wiped her tears, still shaken, and whispered, "Then he's meant to live." And this was only the beginning. The boy woke the next morning, weak but alive. His voice was faint as he whispered his name, Divine. Grace sat by his side, watching him with a mixture of relief and sorrow. She didn't know him, yet she felt an invisible bond tugging at her heart. Something told her she couldn't walk away. Day after day, she visited the hospital, bringing food and sitting with him when no one else came. Slowly, Divine began to trust her, and one night he shared his story. His mother had died in a car accident, and within months her relatives stripped away everything she owned, her house, her savings, even her belongings. At just 15, Divine was left to survive alone on the streets, starving and broken. Grace listened in silence, her eyes wet with tears. When he finished, she gently took his hand and said, "You are not alone anymore." Those words startled him. For so long, people had turned their backs, yet here was a stranger promising him family. When the doctors finally discharged him, Grace didn't hesitate. She brought Divine home. But as she opened her door to him, she had no idea that kindness would soon invite storms far greater than she had ever faced. At first, life in Grace's home felt like a miracle to Divine. He had a warm bed, regular meals, and someone who treated him with care. He began to smile again, though faintly, and Grace did everything she could to make him feel safe. She told neighbors he was like a younger brother, but whispers soon began to spread. People mocked her, saying she was wasting her life on a boy who wasn't her blood. Some even suggested he would bring her nothing but trouble. Grace tried to ignore them, but the hardest battles were inside her own house. Her husband grew uneasy, restless every time he saw Divine at the table. His mother visited often and never hid her dislike. She would glare at Divine, muttering under her breath that he was an outsider. Grace defended the boy, but the tension thickened each day. Then came the night that changed everything. Her husband sat her down, his face hard and cold. He told her plainly, "If you don't send that boy away, I will poison him." Grace felt her whole body turn numb. The man she once trusted with her life had just threatened to kill the child she had sworn to protect. Grace barely slept that night. Her husband's words replayed in her mind like a nightmare. She tried to hide her fear during the day, but Divine noticed the heaviness in her eyes. He had already lived through abandonment, and now he feared it was happening all over again. One evening, while creeping through the hallway for a glass of water, he heard his name. He froze. From the kitchen came the hushed voices of Grace's husband and his mother. Their words were sharp, their plan terrifying. If Grace refused to send him away, he would be poisoned before the week ended. Divine's heart pounded as he pressed his back to the wall. The people who should have been his protectors wanted him gone, forever. That night, he lay on his bed silently crying, the decision already forming in his young mind. Grace had risked everything to save him, but he couldn't be the reason her life was destroyed. Before dawn, Divine rose quietly. He didn't pack anything, he had nothing to pack. On the table where Grace kept her work bag, he slipped in a folded letter. His words were shaky but clear. "Thank you for saving me. Forgive me for leaving. One day, I hope you'll be proud of me." When Grace found the letter that morning, her hands trembled so hard she could barely read. Each line pierced her heart: gratitude, love, and a quiet goodbye. She dropped the paper and ran through the streets, calling his name, searching every corner, but Divine was gone. Her cries echoed unanswered. The boy she had saved, the boy she had promised to protect, had slipped away into the unknown. Meanwhile, Divine walked barefoot along unfamiliar roads, hunger gnawing at him, his body still weak. He had no money, no food, no direction, only the belief that leaving was the only way to keep Grace safe. But life outside her walls was merciless. On his second day, a group of robbers cornered him. They beat him, tore away what little he carried, and left him bruised and bleeding on the roadside. He lay there for hours, staring at the gray sky, wondering if his life was cursed. Still, something inside refused to let him give up. He rose, limping, and continued forward. Nights were spent under abandoned stalls, days begging for scraps. Yet even in misery, he whispered thank you for every small kindness. Gratitude became the only strength keeping him alive. Days turned into weeks, and Divine's life was nothing but survival. His clothes hung in tatters, his shoes barely clung to his feet, and hunger shadowed his every step. People often mocked him, some chased him away, and many ignored him as if he didn't exist. Still, he never begged with pride. Each time someone gave him a crust of bread or a few coins, he bowed his head and whispered softly, "Thank you." One evening, while sweeping outside a small shop in exchange for leftovers, a man stood watching him closely. This man owned a tiny computer repair stall. He noticed something different in Divine, the way he worked carefully, the respect in his eyes, the humility in his voice. Instead of giving him money, he said, "Come to my shop tomorrow. If you're willing to learn, I'll teach you." Divine's heart raced. No one had ever offered him more than pity, and now here was an opportunity. That night, lying on the cold stone floor of an abandoned stall, he thought about Grace. She had given him life when he was dying. Perhaps this man was giving him another chance to live, not just to survive, but to grow. The next morning, Divine showed up at the little shop before the doors were even open. The owner, surprised by his eagerness, handed him a broom and asked him to start with cleaning. Divine worked quietly, carefully, never complaining. But his eyes followed every move the man made with the computers. He watched how wires connected, how programs loaded, how broken machines were brought back to life. At first, the man tested him with small tasks, carrying boxes, untangling cables, sorting old parts. Divine did each one with focus, determined not to waste the chance he'd been given. Soon, the owner noticed something rare. The boy learned quickly. Show him once, and he could repeat the process perfectly. His curiosity was endless. Weeks became months. Divine began repairing simple gadgets, then solving problems that even regular customers struggled with. At night, after the shop closed, he stayed behind, reading torn pages of manuals, tinkering with discarded machines. Hunger still followed him, but now it was joined by another hunger, knowledge. For the first time since leaving Grace, Divine felt hope. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was building something, step by step, that might one day change his life forever. As the months rolled on, Divine's skills grew beyond the walls of the tiny shop. What began as fixing broken radios and old phones soon expanded into repairing computers and designing small programs. Word spread quickly about the boy who could bring dead machines back to life. Customers returned again and again, impressed not only by his skill but by his humility. The shop owner often shook his head in wonder. "You have a gift," he told Divine. And Divine believed it too, not as pride, but as a responsibility. He remembered the promise in the letter he left behind for Grace. One day, she would be proud of him. That thought kept him pushing forward. Opportunities began to open. Investors from the city heard about his ideas. With borrowed equipment and sleepless nights, Divine started to create solutions that people truly needed. Small businesses sought his help, then larger companies came knocking. His tiny spark grew into a flame, and soon that flame became a fire. Within a few years, Divine was no longer the boy begging for scraps. He was the founder of a growing tech company, respected by many. But even as wealth and success followed, he never forgot the woman who once saved his life. While Divine's world kept rising, Grace's slowly crumbled. Illness struck her body, leaving her too weak to hold her job. One by one, the people she had once helped turned away. Friends who used to visit stopped coming. Even her husband, restless and cold, abandoned her when she could no longer provide comfort or stability. The family she had sacrificed everything for treated her as though she was a burden. Her health worsened until she could barely walk without trembling. Bills piled up, and the landlord grew impatient. Neighbors mocked her, whispering that her kindness had been foolish. The same people who had laughed at her years before now laughed louder, certain her life was finished. The cruelest blow came one afternoon when her landlord threw her few belongings onto the dusty street. Grace fell to her knees, pleading, "Please, just a little more time. I'm sick, I have nowhere to go." Instead of pity, laughter rose around her. The landlord kicked her bag aside, shouting that he ran a business, not a charity. Grace's tears blurred her vision. Surrounded by ridicule, weak and humiliated, she thought she had reached the very end. But destiny was preparing a moment that would silence them all. The street suddenly fell silent as the sound of engines roared through the compound. A sleek black car pulled up, followed by an army van. Two tall men in uniform stepped out, their presence commanding instant respect. The crowd that had been mocking Grace grew quiet, their laughter choking in their throats. The car door opened, and a man in a tailored suit stepped out. His posture was strong, his face calm, but his eyes burned with purpose. For a moment, Grace didn't recognize him. But when he walked straight toward her, dropping to his knees in the dust, she knew. "Sister," his voice broke, "you saved me when the world left me to die. Today, I have come to thank you." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Divine, the boy once thrown away, was now a powerful billionaire. He lifted Grace gently, turned to the landlord, and said firmly, "The woman you rejected is the reason I live today." The landlord lowered his head in shame, and the neighbors who had mocked her stood frozen, unable to speak. From that day forward, Grace's life was restored. Divine gave her a beautiful home, the best care, and honored her as family. Kindness, once mocked, had become her greatest blessing. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more life-changing stories.